Just to kick off, I'm Krista Campbell. I've been with Esri for about 11 years. I lead the water industry team. And before coming to Esri, I was a customer. I've worked at a water utility as well as municipalities and engineering firms. And water's always been a part of my career. And I found it difficult sometimes to access information on the Esri websites, which is why I wanted to share some of this information with you. So I hope you find it useful. And once I'm finished, we'll pass it on to Dan, and he'll dig in a little deeper to training resources. This is the water resources team. It is a lot larger than this team, but this is our core team. It's a dynamic group of industry professionals. I'm not going to introduce each one of them individually, but I wanted to put some faces to their names so that if you come across them at Esri events or industry events, you may recognize them, and feel free to introduce yourself and share the work that you're doing or ask questions about Esri solutions and software. Our team is going to be supporting several conferences this year. So if you're attending any of these events, be sure that you check for Esri staff. As I said, we always enjoy introductions and hearing what you're working on and how Esri software is playing a role in your work and reaching your goals. All right, Esri's website is a great place to find information. These two web pages, Water Resources and ArcHydro, include information about Esri technology and how it supports water resources. But they also include stories from our customers, documents like technical papers, and information about events that we plan to be at. So if you visit this page, particularly the Water Resources page, you'll see that there's an events tab in the upper right that'll list the events we plan to attend. In addition to these web pages, we also have an Esri community group that's dedicated to water resources. The community is a place to ask or answer questions. So this is somewhere you can post questions, you can interact with other industry professionals, and if there are questions someone else is asking that you've answered or you've had experience with, you can go ahead and answer their questions. You'll also find blogs, videos, documentation, and more. Another way to connect with our team is to share your work, ask questions by participating in our water resources office hours. So this is a full hour dedicated to discussion. We want to know about your work, the challenges you might have with our solutions, or just get to know one another. Our last office hour was really great. We had a lot of discussion back and forth, a lot of conversations, and suggestions for future topics. So if you haven't participated in our office hours yet, check that out. You can find more information about office hours on our Esri Water Meetup page. And if you want to suggest a topic, hop on in, let us know, and we're happy to add it to the agenda for future meetings. Or if we have time during that office hour, we can jump right in. All right, and you heard it here first, or maybe I'll say second, because I did announce this in our first webinar. We are planning to host our annual Hydro meeting at the Esri User Conference in San Diego. Save the date for July 10th and watch for an announcement in the Esri Water Meetup group. We don't have our specific time or room yet, but we are estimating this to be half to full day meeting focused completely on hydro topics. In addition to the Esri Water Meetup group I've mentioned, we use Twitter and LinkedIn to share announcements and information. If you're on social media, follow us on Twitter, connect with me on LinkedIn, as well as join our LinkedIn Water Resources group. These channels are used pretty consistently to share announcements about workshops, meetups, office hours, events, new blogs, new documents. So if you're on social, this is a great way to stay current with what's happening in water resources at Esri. Okay, and the reason you joined today is to talk about training. At this point, I'm going to share my screen. And we're back to our survey. Just a quick look at our survey. We've got 124 surveys submitted. If you haven't submitted the survey yet, you can find the link in our chat dialog box. Hopefully you've been able to find that. If you can't find the chat dialog box, it might be behind the webinar screen. So look there. And if not, just let us know in the questions and we'll try to give you that link. So 124, Dan, it looks like we have engineering and scientists using GIS leading the pack. All right, let's get to training. This is our Esri training website. You can get there quickly by esri.com/training. You can see that immediately you're able to search for training that you need. If you just use the term hydro in the search box, you'll see that several offerings are shown specific to hydrologic analysis, ArcHydro, hydraulic analysis. This training is pretty good. I took it with Dan when I first started at Esri, and he does a great job explaining the concepts and making sure that the students understand the workflows and why you do certain things. In addition to just searching for specific training classes, you can also explore that there's training for individuals that Esri can help work with you on. There's instructor-led training, e-learning access. If you're an Esri customer and you have your software on maintenance, you should have access to unlimited e-learning. If you're not sure about this, you need to reach out to whoever administers your ArcGIS licensing at your organization, because you should have access to a lot of free e-learning options online. And then there also are Esri technical certification training courses. In addition to those individual options, we do have options where we partner with organizations to build a plan. This means that we are going to work with you to identify what type of training your organization needs as a whole. If your team has goals that they're trying to reach and they need training, this is where you want to go, to the training for organizations. As you navigate up here, you'll see that there are also industry-specific, different options and formats of training, and this will give you more information about the unlimited e-learning options. If you haven't been to this website, this is really your first place to check out all kinds of training options, self-led, instructor-led, online, in-person. You can learn a lot just by coming to esri.com/training. All right, going back to the presentation, this slide covers a lot of what I just discussed, but what I wanted to focus on here is that Esri does have a training team, and we have training consultants that can work with you as an individual or as an organization. A lot of my customers don't realize that this is an option at Esri, and sometimes it's difficult to figure out a plan and identify exactly what type of training you need to reach your goals. So make sure you check into this. If you want more information about training, or if you want a training consultant to reach out to you, that survey that Mariah mentioned that's going to come up at the end of the webinar, there is a question in there that asks you if you want a consultant or someone from Esri to reach out to you. So just stay online, and when that survey comes up, check yes, and someone will reach out to you.
I'm Dan Djokic. I'm the water resource practice lead in our professional services. I'm also the ArcHydro product owner, and I'll explain that, ArcHydro is not really a product, but I'm the product owner. It's a freebie, so you'll go into that. So in the presentation, what we'll do is I'll cover the two hydro classes, and I use the classes in general sense. These are really more of areas of knowledge development and how to use GIS in the hydro area. And hydro specifically is kind of water resources, not utilities, not pipes and stormwater, but we cover stormwater as well, but water, wastewater, we don't focus on that here. So the two classes and the two areas that we'll talk about is ArcHydro, GIS for water resources, or ArcHydro for short, and hydraulic modeling with GIS, or H&H for short. So I'll tell you what topics are covered in each of these two areas, how they are different, and how they form the building blocks for your knowledge development in our hydro domain. And by the way, I am a water resources engineer in my early career, and spent 15 or so years in the water resources industry before I got into GIS. And so a lot of discussions and training and examples that we do in the classes are really a reflection of that experience, and then working with you as our end users who want to implement GIS to support your specific water resources implementations. So we'll start with what is ArcGIS, since the two classes really build on top of it, right? And the idea behind ArcGIS is to provide GIS framework for development of integrated analytical systems for water resources. So the focus really is analytical system. This is not about cartography. This is not about pretty pictures, although we can create them. This is not about how pretty a map looks, but this is about getting the numbers right. And there are several key elements in ArcGIS. First, this is a framework. It's not a solution for a specific water resources problem. I'll come back to that over and over again because it's really critical so you can understand what you need to know to be able to effectively use ArcGIS. It's geared towards analysis, not cartography, and it's definitely not a black box, but it's really a set of tools and methods that you have to use in the context of your own problems and general ArcGIS capabilities. So it's more of GIS that's focused on water resources. It includes the data model. So the data model, that's where it started. A bunch of tools, 300 or so, workflows on how you use the tools for specific use cases, and the community through which you can ask questions, share experiences, and patterns of use. Now, let's review a bit of ArcGIS history and why that is important as you embark on learning about it, right? ArcGIS started as a project to demonstrate geodatabase capabilities in water resources. So it's a long history. It started last millennium in 1999 when we raised ArcGIS and we came up with this geodatabase concept. And the idea was, can we go and come up with a template database design to support our water resources users? So it was all about effective geodatabase design, and that is still the core of ArcGIS, one of the three pillars that we'll talk shortly about. Since 2003, ArcGIS continued development through projects. This included extension of the data model, particularly development of the groundwater component in 2007 that was led by our partners at Aquaveo, and also refinement of the ArcGIS time series data structures. We added over 300 tools that were developed working with our customers and users. So these tools are a reflection of how people use ArcGIS in their daily practice. And we also offer formal training classes on ArcGIS and H&H that are managed as standard Esri Training and are delivered by my team and primarily by me. And I'll talk about that in much more detail later on. And the training program started in 2004, and we've done over 124 classes, 20 classes on 4 continents, and there is a rich history both in class development and delivery, and a large trained community out there. And Aquaveo does specifically the training in the ArcHydro groundwater domain, and I'll mention some of their upcoming classes later on. So to remind you, ArcHydro is not a solution to a specific hydro problem. Although over the years we developed a few of those specific workflow areas and solutions. It is a system for you to build a solution to your specific problem and then grow it over time with more detail and new complementary implementation domains. So you started small. This is the idea about the whole ArcHydro data model and the tools. You don't try to do the whole water resources box, but start small, have core capabilities, and also learn about them, and then implement those core capabilities in your specific domain, let's say floodplain analysis. You get good at it, and then somebody goes and tells you, well, this is awesome. Can we do something in water quality area? Well, sometimes water quality is related to some floodplains and the core data model. So you already have part of the knowledge developed, and you can just keep building and building and building depending on your problems. Now, these can be more details in your own specific domain, like more detailed floodplain delineation and impact analysis, or it can be expansion in different domains. So we want to give you the tools for you to be able to do this. So what are the 3 pillars of ArcHydro? Right. So the fundamental is really the database design, geodatabase design, that keeps everything glued together and makes analysis simpler and faster. This deals with unique identifiers, deals with geometric trace networks, it deals with relationship classes and domains, it deals with how do you relate the vector and raster representation of the same spatial features. So if you have a watershed, you have a watershed polygon as a vector feature, but you also have a watershed representation as a raster. And so how do you keep those two in sync so things don't get array when you go between the two structures? The second pillar is the data processing workflows to really get the data to a useful state before you can do something with them. I always like to quote Mansurad, one of our lead people, and he likes to call this part janitorial data services. So you will spend a lot of time dealing with dirty data that are not hydro compliant, and if you try to pour water over those data, the water will not move where you expect them to, so your analysis will not be right. So you'll be spending quite a bit of time on this area in terms of data processing workflows. And then you can get to the fun stuff, which is the analysis. And that's where, for most of you, ArcHydro really comes to life. So if you are the analysts, my 50% of people on the call, the fun part is the analysis part. If you are more into GIS fundamentals, and you are providing the data to support this kind of analysis, your life is going to be more in these two pillars here, both on the database design and on massaging the data before fun stuff can happen. So the analysis is not just about the GIS, but also looking at the movement of water through the landscape. So we are really looking not only at the GIS analysis, but also support for hydrologic hydraulic model, H&H. So what we normally do is we start with GIS here in at the top here, use it for landscape characterization. Then we'll pour water over it, do some hydrologic modeling, understand how the water contributes to the streams and outlets. Then we'll do some hydraulic modeling, looking at depth and flood extents. And then we'll bring all that information back in GIS and look at things like impact analysis, maybe get some feedback where we go and say, oh, well, I didn't realize the floodplain is going to be this big. So maybe I need to extend my cross sections. I need to improve my analysis. There are some areas that we thought contribute, but it seems that they don't. And that can provide feedback back into your hydrologic modeling. And we have this little hydro modeling cycle. So when we talk about the training, those are roughly the two general areas. And when we talk about the ArcHydro training, it covers the GIS component of this hydro modeling cycle. And when we talk about the H&H training, it really focuses on the H&H modeling component of this hydro cycle. And there is obvious overlap between the two. And so, there is not a very clean line. There is a lot of overlap, and it's a good thing. But in general, if you try to do both, you really have to go and build your fundamentals in terms of ArcHydro and understanding how GIS can then support your H&H analysis. If you work, let's say, in a consulting company or an organization that has separation of these tasks, and that's often the case, internationally in particular, you will have a GIS department that knows this part. You'll have H&H department that knows this part, and they have a difficulty in communicating with each other, and how transition and requirements from one group can be conveyed to the other, and products that are developed in GIS can support this. And this is an area that we cover quite a bit in the class, and it's something that I enjoy doing. So when you look at ArcHydro has many capabilities. This is kind of a functionality grouping of ArcHydro, different areas and tools. The ArcHydro part is really focused on this more fundamental side of things, and then the H&H training part really focuses on this more specified, focused side of implementation. And in general, your ArcHydro skills and training and those three pillars are a prerequisite for development of your H&H capabilities. Again, if you have organization where you have two different departments, the knowledge will be focused each in each, but you need to have some understanding of how these things overlap so you can really communicate properly this information transfer between the two different areas. All right, so let's now go into the two instructor-led classes and what they cover. So Krista already showed you how to get to them. So you can just search on Hydro and instructor-led, and you will get the pointers to the two classes. So let's start with ArcHydro first. And it's a 3-day class, normally taught in person. And I'll talk a little bit about why that works and why it doesn't as a distance learning, remote learning mode. And as I go through the materials, I'll also highlight some of the changes between the ArcMap and Pro versions. So if you go to the class site and you click on download course topics, you will see this detail that shows you the key areas that I'll cover here, so you can always go back to and look at that at your leisure. I will not go into every single area here, but I will really focus on these general topics. So when we talk about the ArcHydro, we talk first about the ArcHydro data model. Again, that's one of the pillars, the foundational elements. What are the feature classes? What are the properties, relationships? How does trace or geometric network tie things together? How do you leverage unique identifiers? What is Hydro ID as unique identifier that we manage within the ArcHydro databases? Then we talk about, and this is really important part, about how do you go about extending the ArcHydro data model to basically apply it in your own domain. This gives you the foundation, and this is all about you adding spice to the ArcHydro cookbook. And then also some of the important aspects of tying different types of models, not just the vector representation, which is in the ArcHydro data model, but also the raster representation, surfaces, etc. The next set of topics that we cover in this class and that you want to learn about are the core ArcHydro tools. And this yellow highlighted element is something that's different on how we do things in Pro and ArcMap. So they're done in both. So Hydro ID management is done in both, but in a different way. And capabilities is there. You just need to learn the little tweaks on how it works differently between the two. We talk about then advanced ArcHydro functionality, how you can control tools doing some watershed delineation characteristics, time series management, and tracing. And then we get into more complex implementation aspects of it. So we transition from the database and the basic tools into more workflow-oriented elements about specific, more focused topics, looking at time series data again, how do you manage precipitation information, do some mass balance analysis. And then another important topic, which not everybody is interested in, but we think it's really fundamental that you understand what can be done with ArcHydro. Whether you do it or not, it's up to you, but it's important that you understand how you can extend the ArcHydro tools or how you can use ArcHydro tools within your larger automation workflow world. And then final topic that I like to talk, I really like to talk, but in general puts people to sleep, is how do you integrate and use ArcHydro to support specific and general numerical models. So we talk about different types of data exchanges and how you can go and, let's say, take your external numerical models and integrate them within the ArcGIS context. All right, so the H&H class is a two-day class and focuses more on the analytical aspects of water modeling. So if you don't know what roughness coefficient is, or what time of concentration is, or what a rating curve is, maybe this class is not for you. But if you are GIS people who support people that know what those terms are, and your H&H people are coming to you for GIS support, then this class might be for you. So this is an important line to draw when you are trying to decide whether to take this class or not, right? And so I'll show you some of the materials we cover in them, and that will help you understand what's covered and what's not. So what we cover in the H&H class, it's kind of funny, right? We have to often do kind of a review of, so if you're coming from H&H world and you're an engineer who uses GIS sporadically, we need to remind you that there is such a thing as a geodatabase that's much, much, much richer in its capabilities than slapping together 3 shape files and call it a day. Then we spent quite a bit of time talking about different data sources for H&H analysis, talk about the good, bad, and ugly of the data that we use to support it. What quality of data do we need to have to be able to support our analysis at the right level of detail? Is it good enough to use, let's say, a 10-meter elevation model with vertical plus minus a couple of meter accuracy to do a detailed floodplain analysis and run hydraulic models that pretend that the vertical accuracy of the results from the model is plus minus an inch? I don't think so. So we will have those discussions and try to explain the sanity of using certain type of data in certain type of hydroanalysis. There are many different data sources that are available to support water resources analysis, and there are many, many data that are not easily and readily available, that are sitting in people's drawers still, that we need to bring in mobilize. One of the things that we have not traditionally talked about, but we do talk more these days, are availability of international data. So there is much more international data available at the global scale. And it's really exciting because the tools are the same. And now they can be applied wherever you can do and get your data for. And now these globally available data sets make it really feasible for full global implementation. The next topic that we cover in the H&H class really focuses on the terrain representation. Look at vector and raster representation of different surfaces. We talk about precisions versus generality. Talk about size considerations, and do you really need to do and use 1 meter digital elevation models to process regional and global scale watersheds? Well, I don't think so, but we'll have those discussions. We talk about specifically how you deal with large vector and raster representation of different surfaces. We'll dive into stream stats in particular, but in general, about how you use regression analysis, whether this is for flows or maybe debris flow, and how ArcGIS can support that. We'll transition then to the deterministic modeling and talk about hydrologic modeling through GeoHMS. And so in yellow, these are things that we do now differently in Pro than we used to do in ArcMap, but the general topics are the same. We talk about pre-processing, talk about extracting basin characteristics, getting parameters and hydrologic characteristic and characterization, and then export data to HMS as a specific hydrologic model. And then we do very similar for hydraulic modeling, and again, talk about terrain preparation, export into a hydraulic model. Then we talk about how you look at hydrology and hydraulics as a thing that is integrated, which we often as H&H people do not do, but GIS really brings those together. And we look at post-processing of the results and floodplain delineation using the results from a hydraulic model. And then we look at more complex implementation on how you can use that infrastructure for flood forecasting and how you can do process automation. Well, I hope this overview of the two classes really provided you with a general understanding of what we cover in Hydro and the difference between the ArcHydro and more general GIS implementation and the H&H part as more focused GIS implementation, and how they together form the foundation for your hydro knowledge development. This is all built in the ArcHydro tools and methodology. And so now I'm going to go and switch in the custom instructor-led classes, and that ties both into ArcHydro and H&H. And these are usually start as a custom class for an organization that would approach us and says, "This is awesome, can you do a class for us?" And we say yes, and that becomes an opportunity to talk about what their specific goals for the class is or are. And then based on those specific goals, we try to tweak the content. And there are two general types of tweaks that we do. One is that we just focus on specific topics that we already have in ArcHydro and H&H class, and we use local data. So we'll apply the exercises on your own data, or we often do an additional coaching day that we then use to basically summarize the experiences of taking the standard classes and then help the organization direct where else to go and do either additional training or where to focus their hydro implementation. And then there is a full customization where very often during these early conversations, we go and say, well, you really don't need this general class. Let's say you are focusing only on stormwater, then instead of sitting through 3 or 4 days of general training, we can go and trim down this to maybe a day or two and really focus you on that. And then this changes from a class engagement really in a tech transfer engagement, and we normally contract that out in a different way. So where are we with the classes today? Unfortunately, we haven't had the open enrollment classes for last couple of years. Two main reasons. One was COVID, so we were not together and getting together. And the other one is that the class structure as we have it now is very conversational. We have a lot of discussions. I actually draw information from you during the class and build examples and sometimes exercises about these things that I learn from you while we are sitting together and talking about hydro. And that is very, very difficult when we are not together. And if you've done any remote classes and try to be very conversational, it doesn't really work well. And the other one was that we're working on a transition between ArcMap and the Pro Tools. So that's completed, and so that's the easier part of these. The custom classes we continued working on those, so they have been held over the last several years, and it's easier to do in a remote learning mode because we do a prep work before that. We know the focal areas for the class, and it's easier to do it that way. And I want to mention the Aquaveo has their Arc Hydro Groundwater class coming up April 5th to 8th. It's planned to be remote, but if there's enough interest, they'll do it in person. So if you're in the groundwater, have a look at that, and you can sign up for it. So where we are with the instructor-led classes, we are completing the transition from ArcMap to Pro. And on H&H class, we are really deprecating GeoHMS and GeoRAS, and we are moving that capability within ArcHydro. And I'm making the class a little bit less interactive, which really, really disturbs me, but those are the times. And we are planning to have a Q3 target for offering a couple of open enrollment classes as remote classes. On the self-training, we talked about the 3 pillars of ArcHydro. You can't just jump into ArcHydro if you don't have the fundamentals. So there are a lot of resources for you to do that. A lot of them are free. I have highlighted a few of those here, and for specific areas, and definitely work with your training consultants to develop a custom training of this core technology before you go into ArcHydro. So to get you started with ArcHydro on your own, we just released a couple of documents. One is about the resources. There is a lot of documentation and resources available to get you started. And then we have a little document on how to get started with ArcHydro, which is really, my recommendation is give yourself a project, get the tools, definitely read the ArcHydro project development best practices document. This is required. Follow the recommendations closely, and then you can change things once you learn about it. Do a subset of capabilities in ArcHydro that you want to focus into the project, and identify a small area on which you are going to do things, and then start using, of course, review the documentation that's available. Again, we have hundreds of pages of documentation on different methods and workflows. Start using the tools in the context of your specific subset of the area that you're going to do, and get her done, right? Get your simple project done, and then work on extending those capabilities. We are going to be adding additional materials, a couple of new documents on hill slope analysis and hand processing coming out soon. And then we'll be adding additional learn lessons, so short and sweet, little videos and documents on how to use the tools in very specific areas like these areas here. And with that, I will stop and we'll turn back on my camera and start looking at any chat or questions.
For sure. We have quite a few questions coming in, Dan. So just very quickly, Dan mentioned learn lessons. And so I wanted to just let you know that we do have a lesson gallery. They're called Learn Lessons. The URL is learn.arcgis.com. And in this Learn Lesson Gallery, you'll find shorter lessons based on GIS workflows. We don't have a lot of specifics in here that are hydro focused, but this is what Dan was referring to, and we're going to attempt to get some hydro specific shorter learn lessons up here in this lesson gallery. So check this out. If you have other interests in GIS, there are a ton of different lessons that walk you through workflows. And then we did have a question, Dan, from students, and they want to learn about if there are discounts or learning opportunities for students. There are discounts for students. There's a lot of free training for students if your institution is part of the Esri ecosystem. I don't have a lot of details about this, and without knowing about the institution that you're at, I can't really answer those questions, but you could check out this story map, which I will put the link in the chat, and you can reach out to me specifically at ccampbell@esri.com, and I can help you connect with the right person to find out more about any kind of discounts or free training for students.
Yeah, so let me quickly mention how the two standard classes are run. So the ArcHydro and H&H class are run like any other standard Esri class. And so although we deliver it, but they're treated as a regular Esri class. So everything, all the rules that apply to those classes apply to those two classes. Discounts, freebies, and things like that. If you can get other Esri classes under that umbrella, you can get these two classes as well. And that also goes for our international users. I have done a number of international classes. They will be organized through your international distributor, and they will reach out to us. And in general, when we do this in person, I'll travel and I'll bring this class to you. And we've done that across the world. So those are the opportunities. But then when you talk about the custom classes, then you call me and then we'll talk. And then that becomes more of a consulting opportunity and training within the consulting domain. But again, you can use your Advantage program credits to pay or your training credits to pay for it. So it's not difficult.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. That's all the time we have for questions. So thanks, Dan and Krista, for answering a few of those. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody. Bye.